And good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to Cruise Inc. Radio 102.8 and our streaming live segment here. We hope that you will continue to bear with us. We've had some issues, and of course, we've managed to resolve those issues, and thank you for your patience. Also, if you happen to miss this telecast tonight, you can always go back to our YouTube page, which is Cruise Inc. Radio 102.8 TV channel, and you can see this entire program later on, or if you want to share it, you will be able to do that as well. Again, we are broadcasting the first in this series in reference to Law 101, and we have a very, very, I would call her a subject matter expert when it comes to the law, and we're going to be talking about tonight the courts and COVID 19. And so, Colette, welcome back again. So glad to have you with us.
Thank you for being willing to have me back.
Tell us, our audience, those that are tuning in, perhaps for the first time, a little bit about your professional background and what you do as the Commonwealth attorney.
Sure. So I was elected Commonwealth Attorney for the city of Richmond back in November 2019. I'm the first woman and the first African American woman to ever be elected Commonwealth Attorney in Richmond. I had an office of about 40 attorneys and then 40 paralegals and staff people to help us maintain the three courts that are in the city, the John Marshall Courthouse, the Marsh Courthouse on South Side, and the Juvenile Domestic Relations Courthouse. And I have been a Commonwealth attorney for over 20 years.
20 years. I'm just 20 years old myself. So,
So you're not even able to drink.
no, I
Okay.
can't even have a drink right now.
Just checking.
And guys, I said that again, even though we're going to be discussing a serious topic, our Commonwealth attorney here in the city of Richmond is a very inviting and warm person, and I would encourage you all to get to know her. Whatever misnomers you may have had in the past, I want you to dismiss those. And like we should be doing as adults anyway, is being objective when we meet people and meet them on their own merits. And that's one of the things that I've been able to do. And I am so glad to have formed this collaboration and friendship with Colette. And we're going to be talking about some things that are going to be crucial to not only, uh, I think, in my opinion, that's relevant to the city, but also relevant to the Commonwealth. And we're going to touch on some things that's happening uh, basically on a national level. And one of those things, Colette, that it came out today, I saw on just about every news outlet, is that the Supreme Court, and I want to say this correctly, the Supreme Court is going to be teleconferencing oral arguments. How will that impact, in your opinion, the way that they're doing things? And we know that this is all COVID related. Is that correct? Do you think that's why they are implementing this teleconferencing?
Absolutely. And I just want to make clear because I unfortunately have not been able to look at TV all day or check on things. So that's the United States Supreme Court, not the Virginia Supreme Court. Is that correct?
Absolutely. This is the top court in the land, as they say, the United States Supreme Court. And the article mentioned that even though the building would be open, but for the safety of all of the Supreme Court justices, that they're going to do this oral argument. What is an oral argument for people that may not be familiar with that level of the justice system?
Right. So, I mean, when you break that phrase apart, oral is something that is verbal, that you say, that you speak. And the argument is you're trying to persuade the judges or the court about what you would like them to do. So you can have a written argument, you can have a motion or a pleading or file something, and that's your written argument. But then you have your oral argument, and in the Supreme Court, first of all, if anybody ever gets to go up to DC and go to the Supreme Court, I would recommend that. It's a beautiful building, and it's got a lot of history, and clearly great history was made there by a lot of Richmond residents, including Judge Scott, Stuart Robinson, and Oliver Hill. But if you are able to attend a Supreme Court argument, you sit in the audience section and the attorneys go up for either side, and they have a certain number of minutes in which they can speak. And they have to answer questions from the justices. Some justices, like Clarence Thomas, are famous for not ever asking a question, and some justices are very involved. So you make your oral argument to the justices. You have a certain amount of time to do that, and when that is over, whether you want to make more arguments or not, you're done. And you sit down and they go on to the next case.
Now, one of the things, again, this is my personal opinion here, and I just want to state that for the record. When I saw this, the thing that came in my mind was transparency. Since this is, as you indicated before COVID-19, you can go and sit in the viewing, and you can watch this, and you can kind of get an idea of what was going on. But with the teleconferencing, the public now is basically on the outside of these arguments. Is that safe to say?
I don't know how they're going to set up the teleconferencing, so I don't know whether they are going to do some type of Zoom type hookup. And at a certain time, you can log on and see the argument that is happening at that time. I don't know if they're just going to restrict it to the attorneys for each side. Generally, since the Supreme Court is an appellate court, the witnesses aren't there. They aren't hearing any testimony from anyone. So it's just attorneys arguing. So I don't know how they are technologically going to reach the public and show that to the public.
And the only reason I bring this up for our audience is because we know that there are going to be some landmark cases being argued. One of them is the Voters' Rights Act that's going to be before the United States Supreme Court, and so we don't want to just dismiss what's going on here. We need to be very cognizant and keeping our eyes on what the Supreme Court does in this. And also, again, I'm not going to get political here. There's some other landmark case they're going to be discussing abortions, and one is going to talk about whether or not they're going to be releasing our president's taxes. So there's a lot of things that are going to be going on in the United States Supreme Court that with this new oral argument that could we don't want to sleep on. So that was my editorial for tonight, Colette. That one, pretty much, I'm informing my viewers about staying informed, just because it's the United States Supreme Court, and it's kind of like germane to us. Everything that happens there, if I'm not mistaken, will impact us for the next 30 years or throughout history.
Yeah.
Am I correct on that aspect?
The Supreme Court is the final authority on the Constitution and the laws of the federal government.
Okay, so now let's drill down into what you're currently having to do in terms of your proceedings with interacting with the courts. Where are you now in terms of having to adjust to this new norm?
Yeah, the past 3 or 4 weeks have been really difficult for everyone. And so, first of all, I just want to let people know that the court system is still functioning. Those people who are involved with the courts, whether they want it to be or not, are dependent on what a judge says regarding their case. And so the courts have tried to balance being accessible and allowing some hearings and trials and motions to go forward, but restricting the number of people who are actually in the courtroom. So, for instance, you can enter any of the courthouses, but how many people can enter is restricted. Where you can go is restricted. Who you can talk to is restricted. So that's what the courts are doing. All of the attorneys in my office and the public defender's office and criminal defense attorneys are still representing people and representing the Commonwealth in the hearings that the court is allowing to go forward.
So, how is that determined, Colette, in terms of what cases are allowed to go forward and what cases perhaps are put on the back burner, if, for lack of a better word?
Mhm. So the in Richmond, let me take it up a little further. So if you start from the top, the highest court in the Commonwealth is the Virginia Supreme Court, and then beneath that is the Court of Appeals, and then every county or city has its own circuit court, and then underneath the circuit court are the general district courts for adults and for juvenile and domestic relations. And so, um, I'm sorry, I gave that, but what was your question? I'm sorry, Bruce.
No, I was saying in terms of the Richmond courts, how do you determine or do you determine what cases go before the judges that continue in kind of like the normal process?
Right. So each of those courts has a chief judge or chief justice. And so Chief Justice Lemons of the Virginia Supreme Court, Chief Justice Joy Jeter Taylor of the Richmond Circuit Court, Chief Justice Brad Can of the General District Court in Richmond, and who am I forgetting? Chief Judge Richard Campbell of the Juvenile Domestic Relations Court have all continued most of the cases in those courthouses until April 26th. And so if you had a case pending between really almost the middle of March and April 26th, you should have received a notice from the court or been contacted by an attorney uh, about the fact that your case is going to be continued until after April 26th. The court is allowing some hearings to go forward. So for instance, if you have a preliminary protective order, which is obviously something that is needed to protect you if you're in a scary, threatening situation, then the court will hear those types of motions. The court will hear motions every day on bail and bond and arraignment. Um, so things that are urgent and crucial will be heard, but most trials, most hearings are going to be held off until the end of April, if not later.
I'm so glad you touched on that about the hearings for the bills and the arrangement because again that's kind of down to where our listeners are concerned is that if for whatever reason hopefully nobody gets incarcerated but if they have a loved one that unfortunately gets incarcerated it has been a fear that maybe they could not be released so to speak to that, there is a process still in place where there can be an arraignment or a bond hearing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and is there a delay in that process now, or is it pretty much still on target in terms of them getting that bond hearing or that arraignment?
So there is no delay. What has changed is that more defendants are having their arraignments by video as opposed to being transported from the jail to the courthouse. And
Okay.
so, and obviously that's for the safety of both the defendants, um, the jail staff, the courthouse staff. So the less contact there is, um, the better it is for everyone. So video arraignments are being heard every day in all three courthouses. People are uh, let me step back. And we were talking about arraignments, but before you get arraigned, right, you have to be charged. And so I've spoken with Chief Will Smith of the Richmond Police Department, and he has advised and instructed his officers that they are to make every effort to not arrest people if the situation can be handled with a warning or with the use of a summons, which is like a traffic ticket. So you may be charged, but you're charged on a summons. So you're not going to go to jail. You're going to be released and just told to leave the area where you are. If for some reason you are causing enough of a disturbance, whatever that might be, that the police uh, feel they have to charge you, then what I want your listeners to know is that if you are arrested, let's say it's a Friday night and you're arrested, you're going to be brought immediately to the magistrate's office. The magistrate's office is in the Richmond City Jail. You'll be The police officer will state to the magistrate what his probable cause is for charging you. The magistrate will listen to that, run your record, and make an independent determination of whether or not there's sufficient evidence to find that the charge is at least sustainable to probable cause of it. That there's probable cause to believe that you committed that offense. If the
Well,
mag, uh-huh.
no, I'm glad you went through that because, again, during this time, there are a lot of uncertainties, especially with the common layperson, somebody that's not, hadn't been involved in the system. And so we're first concerned is going to be, oh my God, what's going to happen to my loved one, based on what's happening with COVID here. So thank you for really drilling down into that and breaking it down. I'm sure that the viewers now and the viewers later on are going to find that information very beneficial, so that they'll know that we just haven't come, the justice system hasn't come to a complete screeching halt at all, right?
No, justice still has to prevail.
All right. Now, speaking of another hot topic here, of course, it has been in the news recently. Channel 8 did I would say, a breaking news about various inmates, various facilities, and I got to give credit to one of our investigative reporters, Miss Geraldine Smith, that had brought that to the forefront about some conditions of the inmates that she's been talking to.
Mhm.
The topic is, and a lot of people are concerned about this because, again, they have loved ones that are incarcerated. And just today, the governor's task force was questioning about the same thing. When are people going to be released? How are they going to be released? What are the criteria for releasing them? And then how does all that, again, in terms of your office, play into this whole scope of being released and who gets released?
Mhm. So I was able to see the video from the Channel 8 story, and I want to let people know that my office has already released about 35 people from the Richmond City Jail who are not going to be released for the next 60 days. I am also looking at a second list of people that I have requested from the sheriff who have release dates going out to July 4th. And what will happen is I obviously don't know the facts of all those cases, so I will have the attorneys who actually handle the case review it and let me know what their recommendation is about whether or not that person should be released. What I will consider once I have their recommendation is whether or not that person would be a threat to the greater Richmond community if they were released. And if I believe that is the case, then I will not make a motion to modify their sentence so that instead of serving their entire sentence, they are going to be released immediately. Um, I know that the people who were, I know that the people are concerned for their family members and friends who are incarcerated in the Richmond City Jail. Uh, but I have to be concerned as a Commonwealth attorney not only about those people, but about the 230,000 other people who are in the city of Richmond. And so that is what is going to guide my decision, is the public safety ultimately of the entire Richmond community. If you would like to, I spoke with the sheriff today just to find out what does happen in the jail.
Yes, please, please. If you care to elaborate on that, yes.
Okay. So if you are brought into the Richmond City Jail, once you've gone through the magistrate's process and you are not given a bond by the magistrate, you will be taken to an area of the jail and put in a room by yourself. So you are essentially quarantined as soon as you get to the jail. You do not go to general population. You are in a room by yourself, and you stay in that room by yourself for at most 3 days. If you get arrested on a Friday, court's going to be in session on Monday, and there will be a video arraignment. You will be brought to another area of the jail. The deputies all have masks and gloves because they are the ones who are going in and out. The people who are in the jail are not being in contact with other people who might or might not have the virus. So you'll have your video arraignment. If you get bond, then you will leave the jail and you will come back out into the city of Richmond, where we already have almost 200 diagnosed cases of COVID-19, as opposed to none in the Richmond City Jail.
I want you to say that again. How many are in the Richmond City Jail?
Zero.
Zero. I think that is crucially important because it goes to the proactiveness of Sheriff Irving and her staff, and kudos to her.
Yes.
And also, I want to say to you, because this is in concert with what the director of the DOC said, the Department of Correction, that health and safety are always two of the main factors in determining whether or not who gets released, what conditions they're being released in, and whether or not they are would be a threat to anybody else. With that being said, two words come to mind: humane and responsibility. Would you say that that is what your office tries to be, is also humane and responsible, not only for the inmates, but like you said, the citizens of Richmond?
Well, I'm not going to step on the sheriff's turf and say that I'm responsible for the inmates. She is in control of the jail and the people who are in the Justice Center. But I will say that all of the attorneys in our office try not to look at the charge, but look at the person and figure out why that person is charged, whether that charge is applicable, and what is the best way to resolve the case so that hopefully we don't see that person again.
You know, I'm also want to give you all kudos, you and Sheriff Irving, for this collaboration of working hand in hand to not only ensure the safety of the inmates, but to ensure the safety of the city of Richmond as a whole. And I think that our city would be pleased to know that we have two very bright women in two very important positions within the city that are looking at all aspects of what's going on here. So I want to say kudos to you and kudos to Dr. Antoinette Sheriff Irving. I want to make sure I put that out there first.
Can I finish with what the sheriff has been doing and is doing in the jail?
Absolutely.
Okay. So if after your video arraignment you do not get a bond from the court and you are returned to the jail, you go into a 14-day quarantine. And so once again, you're still not in general population. You are in a room by yourself. Food is brought to you. You don't have contact with anyone except the deputies. A medical staff person will be taking your temperature and checking on you before that 14-day quarantine. And then after 14 days has passed, they will do another medical assessment of you. And only after you have successfully passed that second medical assessment, after you have been in 14-day quarantine in the Justice Center, will you then be brought to general population.
Wow, that is a very comprehensive approach and being proactive. And again, I just think about, I can hear a sigh of relief from the citizens that are concerned about loved ones or themselves being coming in contact with somebody that may be asymptomatic or could currently be impacted by the virus. So thank you for drawing that out and drilling that down, because that's going to be a message that's going to resonate, I think, throughout the city, is that the health and safety of everyone involved.
Yes, yeah, we don't want anyone to get sick. It doesn't, we don't want anyone to get sick. I just can't say it any more clearly than that.
Well, you and I are going to be coming back in a series and talking more. And can you speak to some of the plans that, in terms of having guests that you would like, and that we want our audience to know that, again, that we want to be make this as informative and educational as possible. What are some of the, or who are some of the people that you would like to have on this show as well?
Well, obviously, someone from the police department. I think that would, whether it's the chief or one of his deputy chiefs, I think that would be interesting. I would also like to have a criminal defense attorney and myself on the show at the same time to kind of give a give and take on a particular issue. I definitely want to ask my deputy in charge of the juvenile and domestic relations court, Kelly Burnett, to be on the show because I think a lot of parents are concerned about what happens when their 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old child comes in contact with a police officer. Can they be questioned outside of the parents' presence? Where do they go? Um, so I want to educate parents about that, and I know a lot of parents are also concerned about the difference between, and we will go to school again. So the difference between school security officers and school resource officers. Some parents don't think we need any officers in the school. Then you have episodes like in Connecticut, and obviously the first one in Columbine. And the question is, do you want an officer there when some crazed, deranged shooter decides to come to your child's school? So I think those are all good areas of conversation.
Absolutely. And again, to the viewers, we're just in part one of this series, and we want you to, we really want to have a set time, and we chose 8 o'clock. But looks like Colette, 8:30 might be the magic time because everybody's off the internet, and we
Uh,
don't have the interference now. But
all right.
again, I want to personally, as the person behind and running the boards and everything, and responsible for all this technology right now. Thank you for being so patient. Thank our audience for being patient, and just understand that when things go wrong, the buck stops here. I don't pass it off on anybody else. I don't say it's anybody else's fault. It's my fault, and so I take responsibility for the delay tonight. And thank you for staying around with us tonight.
I enjoyed it all the time.
Well, we look forward to having you next Monday night, and we'll make a determination whether we're going to move to an 8 or 8:30. We want to try to have this again, this forum, and want you to start doing this right now. If you have any questions, please email your questions in advance to cruisingradio at gmail.com to give Colette an opportunity to review the question and answer the question on its merit. So, again, we don't want to freeze you all out. We don't want you to think this is one sided. We want to involve the audience in this. So, if you have questions, make sure you send them to cruisingradio at gmail.com. Colette, any closing thoughts for this evening?
No, just everyone stay safe. I will say that I asked the police chief whether or not any officers have had to arrest people for congregating or doing disgusting things in grocery stores to the food or just not being a good, responsible citizen. And he says no, not yet. If the officers have gone up to people, if there's been an issue with more than 10 people in a space, or people arguing about something that really was not worth arguing about, the officers have spoken with them and managed to de-escalate the situation, and everybody has gone home and not had to be charged. So I hope that continues.
And kudos to our city, to the residents for acting responsibly in these critical times. That says a lot where our police officers are not having to get that involved, and that we are adhering to the policies of the governor and the CDC and everybody else. And thank you again for that insight about the jail. That was so informative about the magistrate part and the arraignment. All of that was just information that's invaluable.
Well, good.
Thank you so much and have a great evening, Colette.
All right. Thank you, Chris.
All right, take care.
Bye bye.
All right, everybody. This is another episode that we pinned down in the books. Now it's the first of a series, Law 101, and we're going to be bringing you more and more information with our Commonwealth attorney, Miss McEachin. I love that, Miss McEachin. That just kind of rolls off your tongue. Anyway, we like to have some fun here too, as well, because we want you to know that we are trying to inform and educate the citizens of Richmond. So you guys have a wonderful Monday night. It is Monday night. One night is starting to run like the next, right? I can't even keep track anymore. I could tell if the football, if it was NFL was on, I know it's Monday night. But since there's no football, I'm kind of lost. So you all forgive me. Everybody have a great evening. Be blessed, be safe, and we'll talk to you all next week.